Hi, everyone. Welcome to the August Sentinel Collective. Thank you all for joining us today. It's great to have you all here. Today, we're going to talk about something pretty timely, especially for this week. We're going to talk about beekeeping in the heat. We're going to touch on two aspects of it. We'll talk about how to keep yourself safe when you're working in the heat, because it's very easy to overheat very quickly and underestimate how severe some symptoms might be. We're also going to talk about other things like practices that are more relevant during the summer. So yeah, we're going to start with just to introduce the BIP team that's here with us today. I'm Rachel. We also have Eric, Natalie, Michaela, and Rob. You might know some of our faces by now, but yeah, you'll get to know us a little bit more this afternoon. So let's start with Natalie, our science coordinator, who's going to discuss numbers from Sentinel so far.
Yeah, we just wanted to share with you. So I'm going to share my screen and present us just a two graph. You can see it's not going to be a full data session, but we just wanted to kind of share where we are at right now at this time of the year compared to previous years of Sentinel. So this is the summary data. I'm sorry, I have to move you out of the way so I can see my own screen. Okay, so here on my screen, what you can see is the different months of the Sentinel project. So usually we start in April collecting samples all the way to October, November, depending on some participants. And here on this vertical axis, you have the varroa load. So obviously lower is better. And this dotted line here marks the 3 mites per 100 B, which is more or less understood as our action threshold. We usually say that if you reach 3 mites per 100 B on average in your apiary, it is a clear sign that you should consider an intervention. And typically we see that 5 mites per 100 B late in the fall is currently known as the damage threshold, which means that over 5 5% mite infestation, your colony is just more likely to have difficulties surviving over the winter, being just generally associated with lower health outcomes and worse health outcomes, lower survivorship, and all of those. So obviously we want to try to keep varroa load as low as possible for as long as possible. We've also talked about how in the past that the longer you are above in higher mite loads is also more prosperous to sharing viruses and increasing the virus loads in your colony. So how are we doing this year? So here you can see on my figure, I have just, the last several years of the programs in different colors. And obviously the color itself doesn't matter. It's just basically showing you that there is variation from year to year. Some years are higher than lower than others. And then I have this most recent 2023 years in more of a darker color so that we can see how this year compares to the previous ones. And you can see that we are really in the middle of our range, right? So this is a very, I was going to say, typical year in that it's very middle road. We are not in our worst year in terms of varroa load, nor in our best year. So we are starting to see this shift where varroa reaching up. This is the time of year, right? August. We haven't collected a lot of data for August yet, so I haven't shown the August data yet, but this is typically where we see this varroa load reaching threshold levels and then continue to rise up for the rest of the season. So now is the time to be really careful and see how the trend looks into your own operation and see how your loads are evolving. I just wanted to look at this data. So this is obviously nationally, this is all of our samples together. And in this next figure, I'm actually showing the same data, but by region. Most of our regions of our participants are for the Northeast, which is here on the top right of the figure. So this is more of most of our respondents are from this Northeast region. And so there we can clearly see how this trends of varroa load rising up towards the mid-end and the season, and how we are right now in the middle of these trends. And then some other regions where we see more variability, maybe earlier rise. We have not a lot of sample in Northeast, North Central, so this only represent a few samples, but there is definitely some concerns in very quickly rising varroa load, as well in the Southeast. And so you can try to see, I believe that most of our respondents on the call tonight are from the Northeast, but you can try to see how your data match with your region. So yeah, this is mostly what we have here today. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to share with you the current trends and in what the viral loads are looking at like this year. So I don't know if that corresponds to your experience in the field. So maybe if some of you want to share some results when we're stopping the recording a little later today, we can share how those numbers feel compared to what you've observed in the field and start a discussion as if you feel like this is indeed something that you match with the observation you have from your own apiaries.
Awesome. Thank you, Natalie. Now we're going to hand it over to Eric, our outreach coordinator, to share some signs and symptoms of various heat-related illnesses.
All right, thanks, Rachel. And hey, friends, how's everybody doing? Hopefully all is well. We just wanted to have share a little bit of information about beekeeping in the heat, because this has been a particularly warm season for most of us. I can't speak to every region, but definitely here in Maryland, it's been a kind of an excessively hot time of year. So we just wanted to share a little bit about recognizing some of the signs of heat illness, just as far as when we're out in the yard working. I'm sure a lot of us have experienced some kind of funny feeling that may not be normal. And so just want to share this. Of course, this is not intended as medical advice. If you have any kind of health related issues, you should definitely talk with your physician locally and just kind of get an idea of what you should and shouldn't be doing. But just to get started, we're highlighting just about 3 different kind of the more more significant issues you might run into out in the heat. So first off, heat syncope is the symptoms of that. You may experience kind of like fainting. It's not staying out, but you might have a little short period let's say blackout there, dizziness, lightheadedness from standing too long or standing too quickly. So that's one thing. If you're noticing any of these types of feelings while you're out there working your bees, that's a good idea to go ahead and give yourself a break, go sit down or lay down in a cool place with air conditioning, drink cool liquids, and just take some time. That's not a typical thing where you may need to rush to the emergency room, but again, anytime you feel anything different from your normal routine as you're working your bees, get out of the heat for a little while. The other one is heat exhaustion. So that's another kind of more common issue. Symptoms include your cool, kind of moist skin with goosebumps when you're in the heat. So it's like, why am I cold? Heavy sweating, of course, that's normal in the heat. So that can be kind of that one's a confusing one a little bit, because everybody hopefully is sweating normally when they're out. But you may experience dizziness, fatigue, elevated pulse or weak pulse. When you get up, similar to the heat syncope, you may have a little bit of like, what was that? Muscle cramps, nausea, and headache. So I know during some of these hot seasons, I've actually gotten like heat related headaches. So hopefully, that's one of those symptoms. So this is part of what influences our decisions to help inform people. So one of the things you may want to go ahead and do is get out of the heat and drink cool liquids, similar to the other situations. That's going to be a trend. If you notice severe symptoms of heat exhaustion, definitely you want to call 911 or get the urgent care. Ideally, if you're working in the heat, you're not working in the heat alone. So in that situation, definitely don't leave a fellow beekeeper or individual alone in the heat. It's a good idea to remove all unnecessary clothing as much as possible, and to apply cool compresses to the kind of warmer areas, your head, neck, armpits, groins. Symptoms of heat stroke. So this, of course, is a much more serious issue. Confusion or loss of ability to speak, loss of consciousness, going into a kind of a long-term coma. Hot, dry skin or profuse sweating and seizures. Of course, very high blood body temperature, and this is a fatal issue if it's not very, very promptly addressed. So again, being mindful of some of the symptoms that these illnesses can show. Definitely a good idea going out in the heat. Of course, first aid, it's best to have a friend with you with those hot days. And we'll talk a little bit about prevention in a second, but you want to cool the person down very quickly as possible. Cold water or an ice bath, wetting the skin, but not covering them, because you don't want to cover the whole body with a fabric or anything, because that may affect the ability to naturally cool themselves. You want to circulate air, just like sitting in front of a fan, that kind of a thing can help once they are submerged and wet. Also, you can place compresses, cold compresses, similar to the neck, head, armpits, and groin areas. So prevention and safety. That's one thing, of course. Prevention is, I don't remember the saying, but a little bit of prevention goes a long way. Before you're going out in the heat, great idea to just double check the heat index. There's a resource page which is where this stuff came from, for the CDC. UMD Extension Services also has some helpful information. And then, of course, this graph here is from NOAA. So always good to check this stuff out before you go out. Of course, drink plenty of cool water and make sure you have some electrolytes in you. Take breaks frequently. I know the university, just for safety on hot days, recommends every 15 minutes, which may not feel like you can get a lot done in 15 minutes, but if you're intentional, you certainly can. Work during the cooler parts of those hot days. Wearing breathable clothing is essential, and also for anybody who may have health risks, be aware of your personal health. So you need to understand how that might be impacted by the hot weather. And lastly, of course, it's always a great idea, work with a friend. That's great all the time. Few resources, just if you want to do further digs on here, we're happy to send this presentation out so you can either share it or use it. But here are a couple of just helpful resources to keep in mind if you'd like to kind of spread the beekeeping and the heat awareness with your folks there. So that is it for that. Hopefully that wasn't too quickly, but like I say, we'll gladly share that presentation with you if you'd like.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. That was great. It's a very helpful resource. All right. Now let's move on to Rob's talk.
The one thing that I would say about working in the heat, I work in Northern California, and sometimes we get roped into doing, different experiments, and the stuff has to get done, and it will be, 105 degrees. We always try to start as early as possible, and around this time of year, we can start around 6:15 to 6:30. It's warm enough to get into the bees. It's cool, and usually by 12, 1 o'clock, you're looking at 100 degrees. So starting early, even though people might not want to get up early, it is your best option to defeat the heat. And I started preparing, definitely hydrating the night prior to working in heat. And another thing that I found that works really good for me is I bring a cooler and ice and a modern beekeeping suit. Does not leave room for a hat to put ice underneath, but I don't wear a modern beekeeping suit, and I just wear kind of a cowboy hat, and I could pack ice under there and work in 105-degree heat all day. And if the ice melts, I just go to my cooler and put more in, and that really assists me in working in times when things need to get done and I have to work in the heat. And I found that to be very beneficial with putting the ice under my hat. And then if you are going to take a break, get in the truck, run the AC. Ice packs are always awesome. You can put them on your essential arteries on your throat, on the back of your neck. I even just like putting it on my forehead and just laying back and close my eyes for a little bit, maybe catch a little snooze if you're lucky. But when it's that hot, you're just hot and sticky. It's not going to happen. But those are some of the things that I've found that are very useful with working in the heat. And you're working with a stinging insect in the heat, which is not very fun. But the ice inside of the hat is by far my biggest recommendation, because not only are you getting your head cool, but all that cold ice water is running down over your body. And yeah, you're going to be soaked, but you're going to be soaked anyway. So you might as well be soaked and be happy. But those are some of the tips and tricks that I've learned over the years and working in exceptional heat. I mean, I've been out in the field. I think it was 2 years ago. We did a Bee Optimal experiment, and me and Matt were just, it's 105, and we're doing brood area, which means that we go through every single frame of brood and we measure that area of brood in the colony. So you're in the colonies a lot. They're not happy. You're not happy. So staying cool is one way to make that observation that you have to do more enjoyable. And like I said, if you know you're going to be working out in the heat, you definitely want to start early in the morning. You'd rather be done at 1 or 2, not working at 3, 4, or 5 when it's the hottest part of the day. But yeah, if you guys have any um, questions on working in the heat, I'll try to answer them the best. Another big one I would say is you want to drink something with electrolytes throughout the day. You don't just want to drink water, because if you just drink water throughout the day, by around 3 or 4, you're basically going to hit a wall and you're going to end up really tired. So when you're sweating a lot, you need electrolytes, you need sugars and salts and these other additives that you don't get from water. And I will say, Gatorade it's a cheap one. I know that drinking those extra electrolytes, salts, and sugars, you're not going to peter out of 4. And I mean, you might make an extra 2 hours, but you're still going to be exhausted. Those are just some of my tidbits from working in Northern California here for the past 12 years. So I've got some experience. Yeah, when Eric gave me the opportunity to talk about working in the heat, I've worked in some heat out here, and we get these experiments where we might have to go through 60 to 100 colonies, and you're kind of stuck with, you got to get through it. So you figure out ways to
And I feel like a lot of the
do
the
that.
smaller scale beekeeper might also resonate with that, when it's like after a day of work and you want to go inspect your colonies, and it's just like, I only have 10 more to do or 5 more to do, and want to get this done. So maybe, like as you were saying, like waking up earlier, maybe you could do your inspection early in the day before you go to work, and then you can sleep at work, right?
Yeah, yeah, and the main thing is like, look at the sunrise. Like, I mean, here in the morning, it's not that cool. We're looking at mid 70s at 6:30 in the morning. So even if you start at 6, like I said, by 11 or 12, you're 100 plus. So there's no way around it. It's just the earlier you start, the better.
So I want to add one thing with just for those of you who don't know Rob. Rob is one of our longest serving tech transfer team members. So he works a lot with our queen breeders. He of course does sampling all over. So he's of course seen a lot of stuff now. But yeah, I just wanted to start transitioning this to the next topic, because one of the things that we've got about 20 minutes, and we want to have plenty of time for questions and comments. But the other part of this is we wanted to talk a little bit about mite management during the heat, the hot season or the hot times of year, months, because typically, like, at least speaking to our particular area, it's been a kind of a excessively hot and consistent summer so far. And I, for one, kind of missed that window of, like, just either before or just at or after when I was pulling supers, for the opportunity to apply formic acid, because I prefer formic acid. But it's been too hot. So I guess, this is maybe a good natural transition time to talk a little bit about, what are some, like, I guess first off, maybe ask some questions like, what is everybody doing to manage their mite loads while you're monitoring with Sentinel or beyond. So what are you all doing? And you're welcome to you're welcome to start your video if you would like to share and kind of communicate.
One of the best ways to look for mites is not only doing varroa washes, but also to take sealed brood and just pick open a couple, and you want brood that has a head on it, and just scratch it open with the hive tool back and forth, and then bang it out on a white lid, and that's going to give you pretty much your actual infestation rate. And as Erica talked about, the formic acid does a wonderful job at killing the mites under the cappings. And my favorite time to scratch open the brood and see how many mites there are is after doing a formic acid treatment, because not only can I see how many mites there are, but I could see how many mites that were killed under the cappings. And that, I believe, is becoming more popular with commercial beekeepers, side layer beekeepers, and also hobbyists, is something that could kill the mites under the cappings. And it's very apparent to see it when you scratch open that brood and bang it out on the lid. And there's nothing better than, you see the mites that you see, but when they're dead, that to me is gratifying. But maybe that's just me. I hate them. They've been ruining beekeeping, and that's why I got into this. So, but yeah, just scratching that brood open and banging them out that's your best way to tell what's going on, because 80% of the mites are under the cappings. And monitoring with alcohol washes is a little less invasive of scraping open. If it's a deep frame, you're looking at almost 1,000 cells. That's 1,000 bees you're wiping out. But it is a way to look. Yeah, and a lot of people, they think, oh, well, if I'm going to find the mites are going to be in the drones. Well, if you have a heavy infestation, it just depends on the timing of it all and when those mites detect that pheromone that the bees use to actually cap the cells. The mites use that same pheromone to jump in the cells, and they go down to the bottom and they hide in the royal jelly, and they've got a little snorkel apparatus. So they're really hard to detect for the bees, and the bees are at a disadvantage. But one thing we can do is disrupt it a little bit and see how many are there and decide what treatment works the best from there. You can do it on a small portion, but I feel like if you're going to be banging them around and whacking them, you might as well just do the whole side. For me, I get gratification after I want to see how many are actually in there, so I kind of know what kind of infestation is there. And the worst is when you scrape them all off and bang them out, and there's like 3 or 4 mites in there, and then you're like, crap, I just killed 1,000 bees. But in an alcohol wash, you're killing 300 anyway. I mean, what's 700 more? um Honestly, from what I've seen, is it kind of creates colony vigor when she gets disrupted and there's a bunch of bees killed. She's got to try to lay a bunch of eggs and make up for that.
That's a really interesting idea there, Rob. Like to do that. I mean, that might be an interesting like educational day for some of our beekeepers to like use that method to check it out. But like,
Yeah,
would
and
you
you
necessarily
want to make
recommend that
sure
on a hot
when
day?
you do it is you really want something with a head on there. So it's sort of like the hygienic test, but you want something with a head, because if you're picking stuff that doesn't have a developed head, it just becomes a bunch of mush, and then you're sifting around with the hive tool trying to find the mites. But if it's a developed pupa where there's actually a start of an exoskeleton and there's molts involved, the pupa is much more durable, so it's easier to actually find the mites.
Interesting. So is this something that you would typically do, like again, kind of in the heat, or is this kind of an all-time, it's nice to do like, this time of year in general?
It's an all-time thing, but I wouldn't do it like in the spring when they're starting up and you need as much brood as possible. This is something that you do like when there's a honey flow on.
Yeah,
When
you're
there's
gonna,
an
yeah,
adequate amount of bees. You don't want to be bashing out bees if they're not reproducing.
maybe not like October, but July,
No, no,
August.
no. And I'm glad you put a time with it, because for me, I'll do it any time of the year. But I'm working for commercial guys. They're trying to have me come out there and figure out exactly what is going on there. And I'm going to exhaust every method that I know to try to figure out, hey, this is the culprit. It's mites, or maybe it's a disease or something else. But I try to exhaust every method that I know to make sure it's not mites.
Cool, thank you.
And
So,
often it's mites.
and
So
often that's what we find, isn't it?
whenever you do a mite treatment, you'll always want to come back, and you don't per se need to do the the mite wash in the beginning of the treatment, but you want to make sure what you put in there and spent your money on, you want to make sure that worked. You don't know. Joe down the road may have 15 colonies and he hasn't treated for 15 years, and he just replaces colonies and they're full of mites. So you really got to be wary of your neighbors. And that's why it's good to use things like the Sentinel program, where you can monitor these pest levels, because unless you're banging out brood and doing all this extra work killing bees, you're not going to know what you got. So I've been definitely recommending even the commercial guys that don't want to sign up and pay our premium for tech team specialists to come out and do alcohol washes. It's not that much money to just monitor and know how many mites that you have, because if you don't know what you have without that information, you're just shooting in the dark. You have no idea what you're dealing with. So I believe this program is really good, and feel free to reach out to any of us. We can give you more information.
So want to just for the last couple of minutes here, um, I guess does anybody have any questions for, especially for Rob? Because one of the things, of course, in his time with us, he's been working with a lot of beekeepers. I don't know how many thousands of colonies he's opened up, but where it comes to disease identification and assessment, and even if it's possible treatment, Rob is one of the authorities on that. But also just any other questions you may want to ask that we can help out with while you guys are here, because we've got about 5 minutes.
So here's something that's interesting. If you have a healthy colony and you've got adequate, basically daylight and forage, in Northern California, we will carry drones through the whole fall and into the spring. Whether this is a good or a bad thing, we don't really know for sure. But I will say that if you're seeing drones being laid, that means that you've got adequate forage. The colony is very healthy. The one thing you do have to worry about, of course, is mites. And I will say, I started off in 2006 keeping bees, and I thought, oh, I'm gonna drone trap. And then I realized very quickly that if I drone trap, I make a medium less of honey. So I started treating and getting away from drone trapping because I liked honey more than freezing drones and dealing with that every 2 weeks. Um, but I hope that answers your question. But seeing drones throughout the year, and especially here in Northern California, they've been carrying drones, especially over the past 10 years through the winter because of the amount of pollen and supplemental pollen that we will feed starting usually the third to fourth week of August up until mid-November. We'll feed about 10 to 15 pounds of pollen. And basically we do that to maintain size of the cluster and to keep those populations big. So when we are ready to start feeding pollen again in January, we're going to have our 8 frame average to get our 200, 225 bucks going into almonds. I would say, I mean, the drones are a good way to monitor mites, but the varroa mite prefers the drones, but it doesn't mean that they're only going to pick drones. They're opportunistic. They take advantage of the resources they have.
This year, one of the research projects that's going on with Sentinel is about doing an alcohol wash of drones in the field to compare that result to other results throughout the season. So that's probably factoring into the conversation.
And that's
interesting. I'm anxious to see that.
Yes, and that's in collaboration with I don't know if you are familiar with Zach Lamas, but we're doing some collaborative stuff with him this season. So with that being said, if anybody has any extra questions or things that they would like to ask, you're certainly welcome to. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. But yeah, Rob, thank you so much for joining us and for coming in and sharing some of this with your experience. And definitely everybody, thank you for joining us and for participating this year. We really appreciate you all.